I want to tell you about my innovative marine XR-80 that I've modified, removed the back section, and the light comparison that I performed on it with the Radion XR-15s. I've done a comparison with a single light XR-15 Gen 4 and an XR-15 Gen 5. So I'll show that to you guys in a little bit here. And then I've also done a comparison on the Gen 5 Radions, the XR-15 Blues. The comparison I did between the 4 and the 5 was also on the Gen 5 Blue with the XR-15 Gen 4 Pro in the AB Plus spectrum. The lights are mounted using a standard XR-15 standard RMS mount. And I wanted to show you guys the video here to kind of give you an idea of the rockscape that I have to work with. So when you look at the results, the PAR results, you'll have a sense for the readings and why I got some of the readings that I got. You might notice that on the left side of the tank, all the way to the left, the readings are a bit lower, and that is because of the fact that there's a lot more rock work on the left side than the right side, especially towards the left wall there, and that is why I got some of the lower values that you might see later in the video. Comparing the XR-15 Generation 4 and Generation 5. Settings for these lights. So I'm using a Radion Gen 5 Blue version, and I have all the colors set to 100% maximum value, and then the intensity set to 100% maximum value. For the G4s, I've done something similar with the one caveat. Because it's not a blue version, I actually have the G4 set to the AB Plus program with the intensity set to 100%. I believe with the AB Plus program, most colors are at 100%, most of the blue colors are at 100%, if not all the blues are. And then the whites, the greens, and the reds are like around 24. But the intensity was set to 100% for the G4s. Here's the results of comparing the Gen 4 Radion XR-15 to the Gen 5 Radion XR-15. I ran this test on my Innovative Marine XR-80, where I removed the back section from that tank. So I've got a total depth of 24 inches and it's 48 inches wide. When I ran this test, I had the Gen 4 light on the left side of the tank and the Gen 5 light on the right side of the tank. When I was taking the PAR readings, one thing I did was turn off the light that I was not testing so that it did not interfere. There is one caveat here. These two lights were not tested on the same part of the tank, so keep that in mind. But even with that information, I think it's still pretty good results. Another thing to keep in mind is that my tank depth is 16 inches, but I've lost an inch and a half on top and about an inch and a half on bottom due to sand. At the very top on the Gen 4 light, right at the watermark level, I'm seeing about 500 PAR right underneath the puck itself, and then you can see these numbers are a bit lower, so there's a pretty large difference between the outside and then the middle where the actual puck is. So this is right at the water line, and I am using the standard Radion mount. So the RMS mount is what's being used here. And I'll tell you later the actual height of the light from the water line. Right at the very top, it's very hot right underneath the puck, and then much cooler on the outside. Now, if we look across at the same at the same level where the water line is, the G5 XR-15 is quite a bit more dispersed. So it's still got a hot spot right in this region, but the rest of it is very dispersed, and as you can see, the outside regions are a bit higher and closer to the center as well. So definitely the spread is better, but again, this is at the top and where the water level is, and not necessarily a key point. A little bit more important would be 4 inches down from the water. So this is at a depth of 4 inches below the water line. We're starting to see these kinds of numbers here. As you can see, the G4 is starting to get a bit better in regards to its spread. Another thing I have to tell you is that there was no diffuser used either. So this is a G4 without a diffuser. Again, we got some pretty cool spots around the outside, but it's started to get a little bit more dispersed, and we're losing that very hot spotlight type of area, and it is becoming a little bit better. Now, if we go across and compare that to the G5, again, it shows that the spread is much better. You can see that we are much better in regards to par values on the outside, and then also in the center. The par values are lower right at the very center, but you can see it's much more dispersed. So again, I think this is again showing what Ecotech has been trying to do with the G5. Basically cut off that very top peak that you get with the light in the center, and then kind of spread some of that out towards the outside, and it looks like they've done a pretty good job of that here. So at the 4-inch, it's looking pretty good. In these par values, this is kind of what tells you what you would expect at the 4-inch line. So pretty good par values. SPS would do pretty good here. And now if we go to the 8-inch depth, so 8-inch below the water line, you can see that the Gen 4 again is getting better at the spread. Its spread is improved considerably from the water line, but still cool spots on the outside. If you can see here, there's a spot here that I've grayed that I have not taken the measurement of. This is probably because there was some kind of an obstacle there, like my live rock that's in the tank that kept me from taking a reading at that point. So if we go across and now look at the G5 at that same location, you can see just from the coloration here, these numbers do correlate to the color that you're seeing. So you can see that it is much more distributed and evenly distributed, as I guess what I meant to say. These numbers are much more evenly distributed. We see a lot of 200s here, 200s down here, 260s, 140 out here. but then you can see that the rest of it is actually pretty good. So uh, uh, distribution is definitely a lot more even with the G5 lights. Par levels are a bit lower in the very center, but then again, you get much better par values on the outside. This right here, you're probably seeing a bit of a hot area. This is probably due to reflection from the tank walls here. Now, if we go all the way to the very bottom of my tank, where is at the sand region, sorry about the background noise, at the sand region, we're getting these kinds of values on the G4, but that's the sand is about 13 inches below the water line in my tank. So it's not a very deep tank, but around 13-inch depth. These are the kind of numbers that I'm seeing in my tank in regards to the Gen 4. Again, these gray areas, just obstacles. I could not take any readings. But again, it spread. It's more evenly distributed down here, so the G4s definitely benefit from getting that additional height as they get the light gets further away. It gets more distributed and evenly distributed and more and more even. Now if we look across to the Generation 5 light, quite a bit interesting. As you can see, it's still pretty well distributed. Distribution is still really even, but also the drop in par levels is not that much either. So I think it's overall it's much better light in regards to both being evenly distributed vertically, but then also horizontally as well. I think it's just doing a much better job. But then again, this could also be due to the fact that it's the right side of my tank versus this light being on the left side. So I tested this one on the left side and this one on the right side. It would have been better if I did both tests on the same side. Just time, unfortunately, just did not allow for me to do that. So this is what my par distribution looks like with 3 Generation 5 XR-15s. I think these results are pretty good. I'm pretty happy with these numbers. I never ran this test using Gen 4s because I didn't have Gen 4s. 3 Gen 4s. I only had 1 Gen 4, which I brought over from my JBJ 45, and then I was going to buy 2 more Gen 4s to have the 3, but then pretty much at the same time the Gen 5s came out, so I decided to switch over to Gen 5s instead. So kind of here's where the numbers are for the Gen 5 then. So as you can see, I've got the 3 lights. The center one's obviously dead center in the middle of the tank, and then I've got from the center of each light, from the center light to the center of the left light, there's about a 12-inch gap, and same thing for the right light as well. There's about a 12-inch gap there. So if we look at the par distribution all the way at the water line, one other thing I have to mention is that I was running my wave makers. So I have 2 wave makers on this pump. I have Ecotech MP40 and an MP10. MP40 is basically shooting all the way across the 48-inch length, and then there's an MP10 that's on the MP40 is over here, and then the MP10 is kind of over here, and the back, and just pushing forward in this direction. And so with the wave makers running and rippling and all that happening at the water line, I'm seeing these kinds of numbers. And they are looking pretty hot. So 700, 800 par all the way at the water line, where these lights kind of cross each other. So, just getting a lot of par. Just very hot region here. But the hot region is relatively speaking distributed. And then if we look outside towards the outside edges of the tank, even all the way at the very top at the water line, still pretty decently distributed. You can see by the colors and the numbers, it's not that bad at all. Looking very good. Again, this is probably too hot for anything to be growing, but you could theoretically have stuff growing out of your tank. If we go 4 inches below the water line, this is where things start to look really good. In my opinion, just by looking at the color distribution here, just it looks very evenly distributed. Again, we got some, again here, this is kind of the hot region where the lights kind of intersect each other, so it gets pretty warm over here, and that's to be expected. But as you can see, very nicely distributed. Yeah, you can see there's a pretty big gap between the outside and the center, but I think that's okay. I think that's okay. It's not that bad at all. I could possibly improve it by basically spreading these outside lights out a little bit further, but I have not decided to do that yet. So I think that's definitely a possibility. That'll give me some numbers that are a bit higher on the outside and a bit lower in the center. So I might do that. Maybe increase this to 13 inches from center to center, and I might get better numbers. But even at the 12-inch from center to center, pretty good, and that's only 4 inches below the water line. Again, I'm using the standard RMS mounts for the XR-15s, and then I have the Gen 5 kits that I have purchased for those, so I can mount the Gen 5 lights on there. Once we go 8 inches below the water line, you can see again very good distribution here. Par levels are looking really good at the 8-inch mark, around 200, 300 par, 400 in the middle region where the center light gets some energy from the outside lights, so that's to be expected. Again, that could probably be improved if I spread these two lights out a little bit. So again, when we go down to 13 inches below the water line, very good distribution here. As you can see, these numbers here are pretty low and kind of outliers. The reason for that is my rock work. It was kind of blocking the light, so this isn't something you would see in a tank that didn't have any rocks in there, the live rock in there. So then I have some regions that are grayed out. You see these gray spots. There was just no way for me to take a reading because of the obstacles that were in the way. So there's no readings for those areas just because of the rocks that were in the way. And of course, those rocks are pretty much blocking out the light from here, so you don't get good numbers here, and here. But as you can see, where that wasn't the case, You're getting pretty good numbers, again, in the center, as you can see, we are relatively hot compared to the outside, but again, much closer to the center values as you get deeper into the tank, and the par values are actually looking pretty good too. So I'm getting 200 at the sand bed, which I would say is pretty good. I could possibly start an SPS growing from down here and working its way all the way up to the top. Guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and I would appreciate any kind of feedback. Would definitely appreciate a like and a subscription, as I will be making more videos and providing an update on the Gen 5 Radions as far as their performance is concerned, and more videos of my tank as far as how I have it set up, what type of support system am I using, cleaning regimen, and all those things. If you're interested, please do subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much.